Hi, I'm the Space Quest historian. So, someone made a nude mod for King's Quest 4? And yeah, it's a thing. I know what you're thinking. Why? Why would someone go to the trouble of making this? One would imagine it was born out of the same impulse as people thinking Lara Croft's triangular titties were the pinnacle of computer game evolution back in 1996, and why people these days will spend their quality free time building a lore-friendly, meticulously detailed and crafted strip club into their copy of Skyrim. And from that mindset, it's easy to lump this into one of two categories. One of these is to say, you know what, these are just some locker room shenanigans because, yeah, titties are pretty awesome and where's the harm in that? And then there's the category of people who look at this and are honestly baffled as to why some people would be this hooked on boiling down female gaming characters, ostensibly facsimiles of real-life people with character backstory, goals, dreams, and aspirations, to just their jiggly bits on their chests. Because it seems like the people who make these sort of things are either intentionally dehumanizing these characters because they don't see women as real people, or because they somehow feel it's invalid for women to have hopes, dreams, and goals, which would make them a piece of shit, or they just don't understand what any of that means and for some reason think misogyny is still funny in 2023, which would make them a dumbass piece of shit. And there's a whole discussion to be had about the objectification of women, particularly in video games, which leads down a frankly depressing path where you end up asking questions like why the developers of the Dead or Alive series thought the one thing the one-on-one fighting game genre needed were some frankly ridiculous jiggle physics. And it's a valid discussion to have, to be sure, but I'm not sure I'm the right person to have that discussion. The bottom line, at least for me, simply boils down to, yes, titties are awesome, but let's try to remember there's usually a person attached to them. Like, if you crave some titty without having to consider what their hopes and dreams are, that's fine, that's what porn is for. But I just don't understand titty mods, and I actually find them kinda icky, because the whole thing feels dangerously close to nudify threads and revenge porn and that whole business. Like, I understand that video game characters aren't real people, but it still feels like an invasion of privacy somehow. And I was all prepared to make a short, oh look, someone made a titty mod for King's Quest 4, let's all roll our eyes kind of video for us to chuckle at. But the creator of this mod had other plans. See, this isn't just a titty mod. The author didn't just redraw Rosella's sprite to have her tits out, although he did. He also rewrote a lot of the dialogue, and he even added new things to the game. And this fucking thing went places. Some of them were pretty funny, I gotta admit. Some of them got a chuckle out of me. I mean, flipping the script on Rosella to make her a disgruntled mother of three who despises her shit-stained idiot of a brother? That's funny. Janesta saying that she used to bang one of Lalotte's winged henchmen on the sly? That's funny. I mean, tell me this side of Rosella apparently conjuring up a cleaning tornado with her boobs to tidy up the dwarf's house doesn't get a chuckle out of you. Or the simple fact that the golden egg-laying hen's description has been changed to simply say, cluck cluck, you fuck. I mean, I'm not a saint, and I never claimed to be one. I can appreciate a good dirty joke, and Lord knows I'm a sucker for gratuitous profanity. And some of these changes are just straight up improvements over the original game, like putting a bounding box around all the staircases so you can't fall off of them, or making the whale's tongue a lot easier to climb. And he's also reduced the RNG of the shark in the sea, meaning that you're far less likely to get eaten, well, at least in theory. For some reason, I still got eaten a lot, and for some reason, exiting a screen with a shark on it means that Rosella gets insta-eaten on the next screen, but I think that's more indicative of how fucking awful the RNG in the original game is than a slight against this mod's improvement of it. But this mod had more than just dirty jokes and non-asshole-ish stares to offer, and the more I played it, the more it started to rub me the wrong way. And I just realized that was a very innuendo-laden thing to say, but let's try to stay focused here. There are some things about this mod that are deeply uncomfortable, and I'm just gonna stop beating about the bush here. Sorry, that's okay. I'm gonna need an innuendo counter at this point here. No, focus. There's a whole new sub-quest in this mod that's not part of the original game, which gets very fourth wall-y and also more than a little disturbing. And I'm going to spoil the shit out of it in this video, so if you had any plans to play this yourself, you might want to skip this part. Basically, it's all about making Rosella realize that she's actually a video game character who has been altered more or less against her will. Think Thimbleweed Park or Doki Doki Literature Club, or if you're old enough, the movie The Lawnmower Man, because it's kind of in that ballpark. The first clue that something is not quite right, other than the distracting display of memories, is when you get tossed into Lalotte's dungeon and see a diminutive Roger Wilco standing there, and yeah, I know what you're thinking. Now, actually, I don't know what you're thinking. Please let me know in the comments what your knee-jerk reaction is to seeing this, because my brain immediately had a million different reactions all at once, ranging from jubilance through skepticism to offended, and then all the way back again, and then it divided by 0, and for the next 20 minutes, all I could taste was my own blood. Anyway, if you give Roger a smooch, he runs over to this hole in the wall and pukes. Okay. And if you rummage around in his puke, again, okay, you wind up with this yucky tooth in your inventory, and this tooth just causes all sorts of mayhem to occur. Like, if you walk into the sister sorority in the Skull Cave here, you end up in the Yulin's Flats bar from Space Quest 1 instead. And if you sit down at the organ and tell Rosella to play a tune, she belts out the World of Wonders theme from Space Quest 3 instead. And most importantly, if you go behind this waterfall, you'll teleport to this scene from Police Quest 2, and this is where shit starts getting a bit weird and more than a bit uncomfortable. So you go into this house. Now, at the time of making this video, I haven't actually played Police Quest 2 yet, so I don't know whose house this is, but you go inside and Sonny Bonds is there, and Sweet Cheeks Marie is there, and Sonny has Marie tied to a chair with a gag in her mouth while he's waving a gun around, being all 2 steps away from a murder-suicide situation, which can actually happen if you stay in the room for too long. Yeah. And if you're anything like me, you're thinking, okay, this just stopped being fun. This just turned deeply, deeply uncomfortable. And that's not the half of it. Rosella has this encounter with the fisherman, same as in the original game, but instead of solving the puzzle the normal way, you can just wiggle your tits in his face, which leads him to just giving you the fishing pole outright. And if you then go away and come back a bit later, you find this grave outside the back of their house. And if you go in and ask him why there's suddenly a grave at the back of their house, he tells you that he got into an argument with his wife about the whole titty wiggling thing, and she ended up committing suicide. Yeah. So what you're supposed to do to get this secret ending is to find 3 new items that weren't in the original game, and then shove them into this magical cauldron inside the Haunted Mansion's kitchen, and then shout out a secret password. The items are the fisherman wife's skull, which you dig up, again, a briefcase full of money that you get from Sonny Bonds after watching him blow his own brains out, even more, and a pink condom that's just lying around in a random spot in the game world. The password you're meant to shout out is given to you in this message in the bottle inside the whale, which is written in the code cipher from Space Quest 3. And honestly, at this point, I was not just feeling more than a bit icky from what I found myself to be doing, but also from seeing this many Space Quest references, which just made the whole thing somehow even more wrong. And the more you get into this path, the more icky it makes you feel. More so than if you stop to think for a moment about what you're doing and realize you're playing a titty mod for King's Quest 4. But once you get all the 3 items and shout the magic password, you're teleported to this scene from Space Quest 3, again, come the fuck on, where Edgar shows up and tells you he's actually a self-insertion by the mod's author, and he's been the one fucking with your sense of reality for his own demented pleasure. And as a final, dude, you gotta be kidding me, slap across the face, the last action you're meant to take is to instruct Rosella to kill herself, thereby ostensibly freeing her from the bonds of this demented mod and setting herself free or something. I'll admit at this point I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention because my vision was blurring and the veins in my forehead were popping, and I was really struggling to not just throw my computer out the first story window and start seriously reconsidering my life choices. The only thing that was going through my mind at this point was, oh no, you fucking don't. You don't get to sweep all of this egregious shit under the rug by doing a "it was all a simulation" cop-out, and then just to add insult to injury, force the player to literally commit suicide. It all just seemed like a step too far over a line that had already been crossed several times. And then, as a postscript knee to the balls, the last lines of the mod are literally the author telling us we should all be thankful that he went to all this trouble. Dude, seriously? And this isn't some mod that was made ages and ages ago that just flew under everyone's radar. No, this was published in March 2022. So you've already got the rather yeah but why thing of someone making a titty mod for a 34-year-old game, and the whole baggage of yeah but why thing about doing something like this in an age where we're all slowly starting to realize that women are actually real people and that maybe objectifying them and boiling them down to just their jiggly bits, it's actually pretty fucking demeaning. And then you start throwing shit like suicide and domestic violence into the mix, and it honestly just makes me think of the low-life edgelords on 4chan posting low-resolution wrecked videos of people kicking puppies or getting run over by semi-trucks. And on a purely surface-level glance, it's also a wildly inconsistent tonality. I mean, are you making a titty mod, or a shit post, or something in between? The README file for this mod states that the whole thing started out as a learning exercise for the creator to teach himself how to work with SCI tools, and once he realized he could do more than just redraw the sprites, he started putting in all this other shit. And that just begs the question, if this is what happens when the creators start going on autopilot and putting the first things that come to mind into this game, what type of person are we dealing with here? I mean, you don't need me to tell you that topics like domestic violence and suicide aren't fucking funny, and if he didn't put them in this game for a fucking laugh, then why the fuck did he do it? And after finishing this mod and getting the secret ending, I was all but prepared to do a video where I basically just put the dude on trial for unleashing this pile of stinking dung onto the world with myself as judge, jury, and executioner, but something didn't sit right with me. At the end of the day, as disgusted as I felt by this mod and its content, it still felt unfair to just put out a one-sided hit piece on a guy that I'd never met and just make a bunch of assumptions about his character that could perhaps be entirely unfair. I mean, I wasn't expecting them to be unfair, but I felt I should at least give him the opportunity to reveal himself as a piece of shit rather than me calling him a piece of shit. So I reached out to him, fully expecting to get this sort of, people are so overly sensitive these days, fuck you and your snowflake values reply, or more likely, no reply at all. Imagine my surprise.
I started the mod after first discovering SCI Companion, before I really understood what was possible. The initial intention was to parody nude patches in general because it's such a stupid idea to have pixelated breasts at 320 by 190 resolution. It was about the least titillating thing I could imagine, and that was the entirety of the joke. Honestly, I regretted the inherent issues with the mod's premise by the time I'd added some features that I felt were actually decent, but by then I was stuck with it. There certainly is an edgelord component to the game. I recall at the time sometimes channeling the mentality of a 13-year-old boy if the tools to mod SCI games had been available back in the day. I understand it's impossible to tell from playing the mod, but I am very sensitive to the continued plight of women and other minority groups. I suppose it was a bit of cognitive dissonance on my part that I can be so offended by media that flippantly denigrates minorities, then go on to produce similar content myself. I understand the whole project is dumb. I recognize that men in general are terrible at writing female characters, but it was never intended to offend or demean women. I appreciate the opportunity to explain the circumstances behind the project development, and I'm willing to accept blame for its many faults.
So, okay, that actually seems quite reasonable, but what about all these bits that are just bluntly beyond the pale? Like, what's up with the Sonny Bonds thing, for instance?
I recall it was produced during a time when police brutality protests were occurring in my city, and I witnessed a lot of extreme injustices and violence perpetrated by law enforcement against people looking for some accountability. It was an expression of my anger and frustration. Obviously, it wasn't the most appropriate outlet, but with so much propaganda in US media, portraying my childhood hero as a drug-fueled psychopath felt closer to the truth to me at the time. To speak to the depiction of domestic violence, that was informed in many ways by my own experiences. Having seen people I care about be both the victim and perpetrator of domestic violence, I appreciate the complexity of those situations. I personally feel it's deeply troubling that many women are unable to remove themselves from abusive relationships for a variety of reasons, either emotional, financial, or otherwise. Once again, it was a bad decision to include without more thoughtful consideration of the subject matter.
Okay, again, this is coming off way more reasonable than I was expecting. It certainly doesn't excuse the content or the way it's portrayed, but it does at least provide some valuable context I wasn't able to infer from just playing the mod itself. But okay, what about all this suicide stuff then? I mean, the fisherman's wife offs herself seemingly for a joke, and the player's expected to dig up her skull as part of the steps needed to unlock the secret ending, not to mention that you have to literally tell Rosella to kill herself to get that secret ending, so what the hell was up with all that?
On the topic of suicide, I really can't defend those choices. It's difficult to know how people will interpret the intent behind your game when the players have no insight into the thinking of the developer. I personally have struggled with a lifetime of depression and have had several close friends that have either attempted or committed suicide. I think it's a complex problem that sometimes gets dismissed or avoided because it is such a difficult subject. Its inclusion was often a convenient way to advance the plot without much thought, but I agree that its use in the mod does trivialize the topic. I recall at the time Rosella's suicide was, in my mind, more about escaping the oppression exerted by the player over a female character. A weak metaphor about Rosella existing solely for the gratification and whims of a male player. Honestly, I don't know how I expected players to interpret the situation coming out of left field with such shallow context. I think for me, KQ4 TBOR really highlights how easy it is for an inexperienced developer to make some really bad decisions, especially when working on a project alone or in a bubble. I've often considered taking it down, but I've left it up as a reminder to myself of the mistakes I've made, hopefully not to repeat them in the future.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that these were not the sort of answers I was expecting. I was fully ready to have my dukes up and get into a pissing match, but instead what I found was a person who was reasonable, reflective, and most of all willing to own up to their mistakes. And, I mean, make no mistake, none of this excuses what's actually in the mod, and it doesn't magically fix anything, but as a fella on my SQH Discord said, an apology is just words. The true test of character is to show growth and maturity. And I don't know, I think that's exactly what the creator has done here. I mean, in a world where everyone is busy grandstanding and shouting out controversial horseshit just to get a sliver of attention, there is something to be said for simply being honest and humble, to admit to their fault, to owning up to their past, and showing that they have the fortitude and strength to learn from their mistakes. And that is a rare quality to come across these days, and I'll be fucked if this wasn't the last thing I was expecting to get out of all of this, but here we are. So, my thanks to Doomlaser, the creator of this mod, for taking the time to respond with candor and honesty, and I seriously look forward to seeing what this dude can produce when he doesn't have pixel titties on his mind. So, I'm the Space Quest Historian. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see my first time reaction playing this mod, before I had a chat with Doomlaser, go and check that out on my second channel, SQH Plays. It's full of screaming and swearing. But until next time, I'll see you around the Chrono Stream. Bye!